I'm Lillian, welcome back to my channel Ink and Pages. Today I'm going to be talking about the 9 books I read this summer, which were actually a very mixed bag. But first of all, I read All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is the first book in the Murderbot novella series, and in it we follow our main character, Murderbot, who is kind of not so much a robot as a corporate grown cyborg. That's how I think of them. And so they're like super fast and super strong and super clever and everything. But they're also very sarcastic and a little bit cynical, and have like a very dry humor. But they're also, when they have to actually interact with humans, they can be really awkward because they don't really know what they're meant to be doing. So that was just very fun. This is a very fast-paced and very compelling story that really just like sucks you in from page 1 because it's so short. It can't waste any time, and it's very exciting all the way through. And I really loved that. I really loved like how adventurous it was. I think it had been ages since I read a book that was actually, I would describe as an adventure. But I will say the one place I thought this fell down was the climax of the story. It felt very rushed, not in like a fun, fast-paced way, but in a way that was just a bit confusing because it was a bit muddled. It was kind of under-described, so that as I was reading it, I didn't really understand what was happening because there weren't actually enough words on the page to tell me what was happening. So that was a little bit disappointing because it did kind of suck me out of the story and break the magic a bit, because until then I had been so incredibly engaged. So yeah, that was a bit disappointing at the end, but this was still a really good, like, solid, fun book, a solid 3-star book if ever there was one. So I did enjoy it still, and I really would like to continue with the series now. Next, I finished The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien, which I have been reading since last October, and I finally finished it this July. I had been listening to the audiobook of this every night as I fell asleep, which meant it was quite hard to remember where I was in the book, and I would often just sort of play it safe so that I didn't miss anything out and re-listen to whole sections and chapters again and again. So I've actually probably read this the equivalent of like 5 or 6 times over those months. So I feel like I know the book really well now. It's literally embedded in my subconscious. And it was just a really good time. I love Lord of the Rings. This reminded me just how much I love it. I love Middle-earth. I love all the lore and the world building. I love the like classic fantasy-ness of this book. I do think this is my favourite book in the series, but like my plan is to now do the same thing and listen to The Two Towers and Return of the King as I fall asleep. We'll see how that goes. But it was just great, and it reminded me of how obsessed I am with Lord of the Rings, so it was a good time. Side note, I'm listening to the audiobooks that are read by Rob Inglis. I think they were recorded in the 90s, and he's just got a great voice for Lord of the Rings. He's doing a great job, and I'm loving it. Next, however, I read my first dud of the season, which was The Sanatorium by Sarah Pearse. This is not good. Not very good at all. This is a thriller sort of murder mystery where our main character is a police detective who gets invited by her estranged brother to this hotel in the Swiss Alps. And it's his engagement party, but obviously because they're estranged, she hasn't seen him in like 10-15 years. So that's the setup, and then his fiancée vanishes. There are so many things I did not like about this book. First of all, the protagonist is just an awful character to be stuck in the head of for an entire book. Like, she's constantly freaking out and panicking and being traumatized and re-traumatized and scared shitless. And it's just miserable and relentless to be stuck inside her head for the entire book. Like, she has so much trauma, and it's not the normal amount of trauma that you could expect from a thriller, you know, where the main character nearly always has some sort of secret tragic past. Our main character has like several layers of trauma, and not all of them are even explored or like relevant in the story, because surprise, this is actually the first book in a series, which I shall not be continuing with because I really did not like it. Another thing I did not like is that this is not well written. All the chapters end with like a dun 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 sort of zinger moment, which gets cheesy and gets old very quickly. There's also a lot of telling the reader how bad and how evil this hotel is. So it used to be a sanatorium and it's been converted into a hotel and the locals don't like it, classic. But so much time is spent telling us how bad and how evil this hotel feels. And I was like, how? I mean, fair enough, you can say it feels creepy and you can give examples of like creepy things happening and maybe it's full of shadows and weird noises, but they're like, the hotel was evil. And I'm like, okay, how? I've actually written down a quote from this book, which I think actually sums up a perfect example of what I did not like about the constant emphasizing that the hotel was evil. So it was, her body is reacting to something here, something living, breathing, something woven into the DNA of the building, as much a part of it as its walls and floors. Like, that's literally the worst fucking metaphor I've ever heard in my life. This also had a trope in it that I really hate, and it was revealed like quite towards the end, so didn't see that coming. That was really irritating and frustrating. The actual like main ending of the main mystery was also really dreadful. Like, it was so muddled, it made no sense. I spent the whole time thinking we were building towards something else, and it had like a specific twist that I thought we were building to, which was not a good ending, but it was better than what we fucking got. And and that like vague hope I had for something to be not terrible was the main reason I kept reading this, because to be fair, it's written very compellingly, which was, pretty much the only good thing I can say about it. So in case it's not obvious, I don't recommend this book, don't waste your time. I gave it a 1.5 star. But next I read something I enjoyed a lot more, and it was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is a romance about two people who work in like the book publishing industry. Nora is a literary agent and Charlie is a book editor. And there were a lot of things I really liked about this book. I really liked actually their dynamic, which, you know, in a romance book, if you don't like the relationship between the two love interests, like, it's just not gonna work for you. Luckily I did, and this really did work for me. I thought they were really nice together. I liked all of their interactions, and I think they're just a great couple. I also really liked how this book pokes fun at the trope of like a small town romance. So, you know, the stories where there'll be someone who lives in the city and has like a very exciting and pressurized, fast-paced life and maybe like a very stressful job, and for some reason they find themselves moving to or visiting a small town in the middle of nowhere where they don't want to be because they think it's going to be lame and rubbish, but then they fall in love with a local and probably along the way break up with their, you know, high-powered, stressful, ambitious, bitchy girlfriend or boyfriend who they've left behind in the city, and then they settle down in the small town with their new love and live happily ever after. And so our main character, Nora, is very familiar with this trope and this kind of story because she has sort of taken part in it several times. However, she's never the one falling in love or being fallen in love with. She has been, I think, 2 or 3 times the girlfriend in the city that's been broken up with. So like several of her boyfriends have moved or visited small towns, fallen in love there and then broken up with her. So like obviously that's really bad for Nora, but I thought that was hilarious. And the book pokes fun at this trope and these sort of expectations around like what a small town romance would be in just a very fun way that I really enjoyed. And the third like main element of this book I'd say I really enjoyed was the family aspect. So it's, you know, it's a romance book, it's mostly focused on romance, but it's also heavily focused on Nora's relationship with her sister and sort of the family side of things. And it was actually that element of the book that like got to me the most emotionally, and I did shed a tear towards the end of this book, not because of the main romance and like any sort of angst related to that, but due to like family angst. That was what got me. So yeah, this was just a really good book. I gave it 4 stars, and I was worried like it wouldn't live up to the hype because I feel like everyone always talks about how amazing Emily Henry's books are. Like 99% of people I've heard talk about her have been saying positive things, and so I thought this book, I don't know, I never thought it could live up to the hype, and I guess it didn't live up to like the 5-star hype. I didn't give it 5 stars, but I still thought it was really good. So if you have been like umming and ahhing about whether you think Emily Henry could possibly be worth it, I would say give it a go, because for me, she was. Then I picked up volume 6 of the graphic novel series Monstress by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takada. Volume 6 is called The Vow. And I will say that while it was still good, while I still gave it 3.5 stars, I think it has been the weakest volume so far for me. And I think the reason I think this is because I felt like it lacked something unique in that all the other volumes had. Like all the other volumes either had like a core theme or focus, or they took place somewhere in particular that they were only in for that one volume. And this one didn't really have any of those things, I would say. It very much continues on from volume 5, like it's set in nearly always the same place with a lot of the same characters, following on in similar themes and storylines. And yeah, like it was still good, but it wasn't as good as the other ones. However, there are quite a lot of moments in this book that we have been sort of waiting for since the very beginning of the series, like some seeds that were sown in volume 1 and volume 2, like, you know, they've taken root and they've grown throughout previous volumes, and then they've blossomed in this one. So we did get quite a lot of moments like that, which we have been waiting for a long time. Having said that, sometimes they didn't feel as satisfying as I was hoping for. But on the other hand, this book has a great cliffhanger ending. So, I mean, there was never actually any worry, any doubt that I wouldn't be continuing with this series. Like, I'm gonna continue with this series. It's one of my favorite series of all time. So yeah, it was still good. It was still good. I feel like it just lacked something, like a little spark, I don't know, an edge, something, the X factor to just elevate this to greatness. But then I read my least favorite book of the year so far, which is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. This is obviously a Greek myth retelling of the story of Ariadne. She is in the story of Theseus and the Minotaur, you know, like where he goes into the labyrinth and kills the Minotaur. Ariadne is the princess who is the Minotaur's sister, half-sister, and she helps Theseus kill the Minotaur, basically. That's kind of like what she's mainly known for in Greek mythology. And my main issue with this book and why I disliked it so much is that I really think it fails at its core premise. Its promise that it makes to the reader on a very basic level, I do not think it fulfills. So it's not a lie, I think, to say that this book was almost definitely published because of the success of Circe by Madeline Miller, which is another ancient Greek retelling which takes like a sort of overlooked and stereotyped minor female character and gives her the stage and gives her some agency and allows her to tell her side of the story, which I think is what this book was going for. Like, when you take a character like that and you name a fucking book after them, you are implying that you are going to give this character something to do and you're going to give them the spotlight and yeah, some agency and the ability to tell their side of the story. This book does none of that. Ariadne has no personality and no control over 99.9% of the things that happen to her and happen around her. I mean, a third of this book is actually told from Ariadne's sister's perspective, because like Ariadne had nothing to do with any of that stuff, so the only way we're going to hear about what's happening to her sister is if we switch perspectives, to which I say, why is the book called fucking Ariadne if she's not even the only main character? I mean, she could have called it like Sisters of Crete or something like that, because to be honest, the less we had of Ariadne in here, the better. I'd say the overarching theme of this book isn't the patriarchy bad? Which, you know, obviously yes. However, this book just really, really wants you to know that in a way that makes it incredibly miserable to read. It's a miserable and depressing time. And then you're reading about fucking Ariadne who, like, she's got nothing going for her. There's also insta-love in this book, which I hated and like genuinely didn't see coming. The flow of time is very confusing in places, especially when we start changing perspectives. And the ending is just awful. When I finished this, I actually had to go on Wikipedia and like read the original myth to see how similar the ending was, and like to see what Jennifer Saint had changed. And to be fair, the ending in this is pretty much the same as, you know, the original myth. But having said that, Jennifer Saint had 100% control over this book and over what elements of the myth she used and which ones she ignored and which ones she changed slightly. So she still wrote this ending, and I can 100% blame her for it being awful. And one final note to finish talking about this book, also about the ending of it. So the whole theme is, you know, the patriarchy is bad. And at the very end of this book, there's this weird, uncomfortable undercurrent of like, but women are women and we are strong because we are mothers and we have the ability to give birth. And I was like, ooh, that's the only thing you could think of? Ooh. No, I did not like that. This was really bad. People who have compared this favorably to Cersei, I ask you, what's wrong with you? This is similar to Cersei in that it is Cersei's miserable, shittier little cousin, really. So yeah, no. Then I actually didn't read anything for ages because of how awful Ariadne was, and it sort of made me hate reading for a bit. But eventually I picked up A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers, which luckily I did actually really enjoy. This is a cute little sci-fi novella set far in our future about a tea monk and a robot. And robots at this time in history they're sort of thought of a bit like mythical creatures, because there used to be robots everywhere, like doing all the jobs, and then they gained sentience and were like, thanks, but no thanks, we want to go and live in the woods. And all the robots basically vanished. And we sort of knew they were out there somewhere, but no one's seen a robot in like hundreds of years. And so this was just like a fun time, really. And it's actually quite unusual for sci-fi in that it's quite positive and uplifting in a way that not many sci-fi books set in the future are. It was just a very fun, cozy time, I would say. And it also manages to slip in quite a lot of like a deep philosophical and existential and ethical discussions, which did probably go over my head slightly when I read this. So I would definitely like to reread this at some point. And this is the kind of book I can see myself rereading like several or many times throughout the rest of my life. So I would highly recommend this. It's the first book in a series, or maybe there's just going to be 2 of them. I'm not entirely sure, but I gave it 4 stars and yeah, I really liked it. Next, I read In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. This is a thriller about a woman who is invited to her old best friend's hen do, and she hasn't seen this like school friend for like 10 years because something happened and she cut off her old life and left everyone behind. But now she's been reached out to and invited to this friend's hen do, and for some reason she decides to go along, and then, you know, thrillery stuff starts happening. This is Ruth Ware's first book, and like I could tell it definitely, I don't think was as good as the other couple of books from her I've read. And I thought that the ending, like the twist reveal, was so incredibly obvious. Like from the very beginning of the book, I knew who the villain was going to be. Like I didn't even know, they hadn't even done anything yet. I didn't know what the bad thing they were going to do was going to be, but I knew who it was that was going to do it. But despite that, I actually still had quite a good time reading it. It had quite a lot of tropes I enjoy. It also had like the amnesia trope that I really don't like. And to be fair, it was used differently in this book as to how I've read about it before, but like it was still a bit irritating. So even though I am only giving this 2.5 stars, it has really solidified for me that I really enjoy Ruth Ware's writing, and I now want to go out and like read everything else that she's read, basically. Even though, so this is the 3rd book of hers I've read, and it's the 2nd one I've given 2.5 stars, so I've only really enjoyed one of her books so far. But her writing style is just really fun, so I'm having a good time even if I don't enjoy the ending of the books. And finally, the last book I have to talk about is The Outrun by Amy Liptrot. I read this while on holiday in Scotland with my family, and I thought, you know, while in Scotland, why not read a Scottish memoir? But this is basically a story of the author getting sober and then moving back to Orkney as an adult. But it's also so much more than that. It's kind of half memoir and half nature writing, I would say, and it covers a lot. It talks about her childhood on Orkney and growing up, and then when she left, and then her life in London as an adult, and her drinking and like the sort of problems that caused, and the slow breakdown of her life in London, and then her decision to get sober, and then doing that, and then moving back to Orkney. And she writes so beautifully about Orkney and about the nature and the history and the animals and all this kind of stuff. And that combination of half memoir, half nature writing just really did it for me. She does a really good job of drawing all these links and parallels between her experiences in her life and her struggles with alcohol and now her sobriety, and Orkney itself and its nature and its culture and the animals and the plants and the northern lights in a way that's just really interesting to read about. And it's got very short chapters and they're all just so interesting. Like, I wish this book had been longer so that I had more to enjoy. So I've given this, I think, 3.5 stars. And yeah, if it sounds at all interesting to you, if you like nature writing, you like memoirs, or you like both, I would really recommend it, because I haven't really heard anyone else talk about this on BookTube, and I haven't seen it on Instagram anywhere. So now this is on your radar, like, please do read it if you're interested. So those are all of the books I read this summer. Like I said, a wide variety in terms of enjoyment for me. But I think if I had to pick a favourite, which I don't, but I will, I think it would be A Psalm for the Wild Built. But thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.